The massive cruise ship Serenity's Dawn glided through space like a floating city. Its gleaming hull stretched for miles, housing 10,000 passengers from 12 different alien species. Captain Vexeri stood on the bridge, his reptilian eyes scanning the star charts. The Saurian officer had commanded luxury vessels for 30 years. But this trip through the Andorian Nebula was supposed to be his easiest yet. Jake Sullivan walked down the main corridor, nodding to the various aliens he passed. The human diplomat was still getting used to seeing so many different species in one place. Tall, blue-skinned Altarians chatted with short, furry Valerians. Insect-like Krillians clicked their mandibles, and what Jake had learned was laughter. After 6 months in the Galactic Union, he still felt like he was living in a dream. He found Dr. Lisa Martinez in the observation lounge, watching the colorful gases of the nebula swirl outside the massive windows. The xenobiologist had been studying alien behavior patterns since they left Earth's orbital station. Her notebook was filled with sketches and observations about how different species interacted. "Any interesting discoveries today?" Jake asked, sitting beside her. Lisa smiled. "The crystalline beings from Sector 7 don't seem to understand humor at all. I told one a joke and it just stared at me for 5 minutes. But the Kethfer warriors laugh at everything, even things that aren't funny." Jake chuckled. "Maybe. That's why they're such good fighters. It's hard to be scared when you're always finding something amusing." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp alarm that echoed through the ship. Captain Vexeri's voice came over the speakers, but Jake could hear something unusual in the reptilian's tone. Fear. "All passengers, please remain calm," the captain announced. "We have received an emergency transmission from Union Command. Please stay in your quarters until further notice." Jake and Lisa exchanged worried looks. In the 6 months since humanity joined the Galactic Union, they had never heard such panic in an alien's voice. They made their way to the diplomatic section, where Jake had clearance to access Union communication channels. The news was worse than they could have imagined. "The Devourers have returned." Admiral Chender's face appeared on the screen. Usually composed Altarian officer looked haggard, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. 3 days ago, they emerged from dark space near the Outer Rim. The Kethver Defense Fleet engaged them first. Jake felt his stomach drop. The Kethver were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors, Lisa asked. Admiral Chender closed his eyes. Gone. All of them. 12,000 ships and their crews. They didn't even get a chance to fire their weapons. The fear took them first. Fear. Jake didn't understand. What kind of fear stops trained soldiers from fighting? The Admiral's expression grew darker. You don't understand, human. The Devourers aren't just destroyers. They project terror itself. When they appear, every thinking being in the system feels overwhelming horror. It's not something you can train for or overcome. It simply is. More reports came in over the next few hours. The technologically advanced Crystalline Collective had fallen without firing a shot. Their entire population of billions had simply stopped functioning when the Devourers arrived. World after world went silent as the dark entities swept through Union space, Captain. Vextheri made an emergency jump to Omega-7, a remote station on the edge of inhabited space. As they approached the massive facility, Jake could see hundreds of ships clustered around it. Refugees from dozens of worlds had gathered here, hoping the distance would keep them safe. The station itself was a marvel of engineering. Built into a large asteroid and expanded over centuries, it could house millions of beings, though it was never designed to hold so many at once. As they docked, Jake could see the strain on everyone's faces. Station Commander Tysek met them at the airlock. The insectoid Krillians, usually bright carapace, had dulled to a sickly gray color. His 6 arms trembled as he spoke. "Welcome to what may be the last free station in the galaxy," he said. "We have refugees from 47 worlds here. All of them have the same story. The Devourers came, and resistance became impossible." Jake and Lisa were assigned quarters in the diplomatic section. As they walked through the station's corridors, they saw something that puzzled them. Beings from species known for their courage and strength sat huddled in corners, shaking with fear. Kethfer warriors, who normally stood 7 feet tall and proud, now cowered like frightened children. "This doesn't make sense," Lisa whispered to Jake. "I've studied these species. The Kethfer are bred for war. The Saurians have faced extinction events before. Why are they all so terrified?" In their quarters, they accessed the station's database and began researching the Devourers. What they found chilled them both. 3,000 years ago, these entities had swept through the galaxy like a plague. They consumed entire star systems, turning thriving worlds into lifeless rocks. But worse than their destructive power was their ability to paralyze entire civilizations with fear. "Listen to this," Lisa read from an ancient report. "The terror field projected by Devourer vessels affects all known sentient species. Exposure results in complete psychological breakdown within minutes. Military forces become unable to function. Civilian populations enter catatonic states." Jake frowned. "Yeah, but some species survived, right? I mean, we're here talking about it." "The survivors hid." Lisa continued reading. "They found remote locations and waited. When the Devourers finished consuming inhabited worlds, they returned to dark space and entered dormancy.
And a few civilizations?"
That remained rebuilt from hiding places like this station. Over the next day, Jake watched the refugees with growing confusion. While every alien species showed signs of deep, primal terror when discussing the Devourers, he felt nothing but normal concern. Lisa seemed equally unaffected. They were worried about the threat, of course, but they weren't experiencing the bone-deep horror that gripped everyone else. Dr. Quintal, a respected Valerian scientist, noticed their unusual calm. The small, furry being approached them in the station's main laboratory. "You humans are strange," the alien said, his large eyes studying them carefully. "Everyone else here can barely function from fear, but you two act as if this were simply another problem to solve." "Maybe we don't understand how bad it really is," Jake suggested. Dr. Quintal shook his head. "I have shown you the same historical records as everyone else. You have seen the images of dead worlds, yet you remain calm. Why?" Lisa had been thinking about the same question. "Doctor, is this fear reaction the same across all species?" "Every single one," Dr. Quintel confirmed. "From the smallest Pipling to the largest Gorvac Titan, the terror response appears to be universal among galactic life forms." "Appears to be," Lisa repeated thoughtfully. "But what about species that aren't from the galaxy originally?" Jake caught on to her thinking. "Humans evolved on Earth, which is outside the traditional galactic community. We only made contact 6 months ago." Dr. Quintel's ears perked up with interest. "You think your isolation protected you somehow?" "Or prepared us differently," Lisa said. "Every species here evolved, knowing about the Devourers, even if only in genetic memory. Their ancestors survived by developing an overwhelming fear response that made them hide.
Oh.
But humans never encountered them before." That evening, Jake stood in the observation deck watching the nebulous colors shift and dance. Other beings avoided the area now, too frightened to enjoy the beauty of space, but Jake found it peaceful. Tomorrow they would continue studying the threat, looking for some way to fight back against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. He didn't know it yet, but humanity's strange lack of fear would soon become the galaxy's greatest hope. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they had no intention of hiding. Station Commander Tysek led Jake and Lisa through the restricted areas of Omega-7. The insectoid officer's 6 arms moved nervously as they walked down corridors most beings never saw. His compound eyes darted around constantly as if expecting danger from every shadow. "I should not be showing you this," Tysek whispered. "The Union Council classified these records after the last war, but perhaps it is time for secrets to end." They entered a vault deep in the station's core. Ancient data crystals lined the walls, each one containing thousands of years of galactic history. The air felt heavy here, as if the weight of terrible knowledge pressed down on them. "These are the true records of the Devourer War," the commander explained. "Not the sanitized versions taught in schools. The real story of how our civilizations nearly ended." Jake picked up one of the crystals. It felt warm to the touch, pulsing with stored information. Why keep them secret? Because knowing the complete truth drives most beings insane, Tyzek said simply. The fear is too much to bear. Dr. Lisa Martinez connected the crystal to a viewer. Images filled the screen that made the alien commander turn away. Jake watched without flinching as entire worlds burned. Cities that had stood for millennia crumbled to dust. Billions of beings fled in terror from shapes that hurt. To look at directly? The Devourers came from somewhere outside our reality, Tyzek narrated, still not looking at the screen. They exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions we cannot understand. When they appear, they bring wrongness with them. Reality itself becomes unstable around them. Lisa studied the technical readouts. These energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. How do they project fear across such vast distances? That is the worst part, the commander replied. The terror is not a weapon they created. It is a natural response, all galactic. Life forms have to their presence. We evolved to fear them because those who did not fear died completely. Fear is in our genes now. Jake looked at brain scan data from various species. Every scan showed the same pattern when exposed to Devourer. Imagery. The fear centers of their brains lit up like stars, overwhelming all other functions. Rational thought became impossible. Even the memory of Devourers could trigger panic attacks in some beings. Look at this, Lisa called out. I'd found records. From the ancient war itself. It says here that some species tried to fight back. The Kethver Dominion sent their entire battle fleet against a single Devourer ship. What happened? Jake asked. Tyzek finally looked at the screen. Watch for yourself. The recording showed a massive space battle. Hundreds of Kethver warships approached a dark vessel that seemed to absorb light around it. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons charging for what should have been a devastating first strike. Then the Devourer ship pulsed with dark energy. Instantly, the entire fleet stopped moving. Ship after ship went dark as their crews collapsed from overwhelming terror. Within minutes, the proud Kethver armada was helpless. The Devourer ship moved through them slowly, consuming each vessel and its frozen crew. Every battle was the same, Tyzek said quietly. The bravest warriors, the most advanced weapons, the strongest defenses. Nothing mattered when faced with primal fear. Lisa found medical records from survivors. This says the fear response is hardwired into Galactic. DNA, 3 billion years of evolution created species that instinctively know to hide from Devourers. It is not cowardice, it is survival programming. Jake studied tactical reports from the war. Most made depressing reading, but one section caught his attention. What about these references to something called the immune ones? Tyzek looked confused. I have never heard that term. Lisa searched through more files. Here it is. Multiple reports mention a species that could face Devourers without fear. They called themselves the immune ones. According to this, they were the only beings who could fight the Devourers effectively. What happened to them? Jake asked. Unknown, Lisa read from the file. They appeared during the final phase of the war, fought alongside galactic forces for several months, then vanished completely. No records exist of their homeworld or their fate. The three of them spent hours going through ancient battle reports. The immune ones appeared in dozens of accounts, always described as fearless warriors who could stand against cosmic horror. They used simple weapons and basic tactics, but they never retreated or surrendered. This is fascinating, Lisa said. Comparing genetic data, every description of these immune ones matches human psychological profiles. They felt concern, but not paralyzing fear. They adapted quickly to new threats. They protected other species, even when those species could not protect themselves. A communication alert interrupted their research. Admiral Chender appeared on the main screen, his blue face grave with terrible news. Commander Tyzek, we have received word from the inner systems. The Devourers have destroyed the Altarian capital world. 3 billion souls, gone in a single day. Our military command is ordering all remaining forces to retreat to the outer rim. Jake leaned forward. What about evacuation efforts? The Admiral looked surprised to see humans in the secure area, but answered anyway. Impossible. The fear field extends across entire star systems now. Rescue ships cannot get close enough to save anyone. Their crews become catatonic before they can reach orbit. How many ships do we have left? Tysek asked. Perhaps 1,000. Vessels from all species combined. But they are scattered and demoralized. Most crews refuse to engage the enemy. Some have mutinied rather than face the Devourers. After the transmission ended, Jake looked at his companions. So the entire galactic military is retreating? They have no choice, the commander said. How do you fight an enemy that defeats you before the battle begins? Lisa had been thinking about the genetic data they found. Commander, I need to run some tests. Can you get me brain scans from humans and various alien species? For what purpose? I have a theory about why Jake and I are not affected by Devourer terror. Over the next several hours, Lisa ran comprehensive scans on volunteer subjects from different species. The results confirmed her suspicions. When shown Devourer imagery, every alien subject experienced massive activation in their brain's fear centers. Ancient pathways lit up like emergency beacons, flooding their systems with terror hormones. But human brains showed a completely different pattern. Look at this. Lisa showed Jake and Tysek the comparison scans. Human fear responses are much more localized and controlled. We register the threat, but we do not have the overwhelming terror reaction. Why? The commander asked. What makes your species different? Earth, Jake realized. Our world is what the Union classifies as a Class 12 death world. Everything on our planet tried to kill us for millions of years. We evolved to face constant threats without being paralyzed by fear. Lisa nodded excitedly. Exactly. While other species develop specific fears of devourers, humans develop general courage. We learned to think clearly under pressure because those who panicked died. Tysek studied the brain scans with growing amazement. You are saying humans are naturally immune to the devourer's greatest weapon. Not immune, Lisa corrected, but resistant. We feel fear, but we do not let it control us. Jake thought about the implications. If that's true, then maybe humans can do what no other species can do. What? The commander asked. Fight back. Their conversation was interrupted by emergency alarms throughout the station. Tysek activated the main viewer, showing the space around Omega 7. 3 dark shapes had appeared at the edge of the system, moving slowly toward them like predators stalking prey. The Devourers had found them, all around the station, beings from dozens of species fell to their knees as overwhelming terror washed over them. Some fainted. Others began weeping uncontrollably. The few remaining military personnel abandoned their posts as primal fear took hold, but Jake and Lisa stood calmly at the window, watching the approaching threat with clear eyes and steady hands. Commander, Jake said quietly, I think it is time to test our theory. The emergency meeting room on Omega 7 buzzed with tense voices as alien scientists gathered around Dr. Lisa Martinez. Her presentation screen showed brain scans and genetic analysis that would have seemed impossible just days before. Commander Tysek sat at the head of the table, his compound eyes focused intently on her data. The evidence is clear, Lisa explained to the assembled researchers. Humans show a fundamentally different response to devourer stimuli, while other species experience complete psychological breakdown. Humans maintain cognitive function and decision-making ability. Dr. Quintal, the small Valerian scientist, raised a furry paw. But how is this possible? The terror field affects all known life forms in the galaxy. That's exactly the point, Lisa replied. All known galactic life forms. But humans evolved outside this galaxy's influence, on a world that created very different survival pressures. She switched to a display showing Earth's deadly environment. Images of hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, predators, and diseases filled the screen.
Ow.
Most of the alien scientists turned away from the horrific scenes, but Jake watched calmly from the back of the room. Your homeworld is classified as a Class 12 death world, said Dr. Zephron, a tall, crystalline being whose body sparkled with nervous energy. We assumed this made humans dangerous, not useful. Jake stepped forward. On Earth, everything tries to kill you from the moment you're born. Storms that can destroy cities, animals that hunt in packs, diseases that spread through the air. We learn to face constant threats without freezing up. Most species evolved specific fears to avoid particular dangers, Lisa continued. Humans evolved general bravery. We had to think clearly under pressure or die. The door to the meeting room slid open, and Captain Ryan Brooks entered with several other humans. The tall naval officer wore the blue uniform of Earth's space fleet, and his calm demeanor stood out sharply against the frightened aliens around him. "Sorry I'm late," Brooks said. "My ship just arrived from the inner colonies. I brought additional personnel and some disturbing news." Behind him walked Colonel Amy Chen, a compact woman with sharp eyes and military bearing. Dr. Ben Rodriguez followed, carrying data tablets and medical equipment. The three humans moved with confidence that seemed almost alien to the gathered scientists. "What news?" Tysek asked. Captain Brooks activated a holographic display showing star charts. Red markers indicated dead worlds, and the pattern made everyone in the room shiver with fear. "The Devourers are moving faster than predicted. They've consumed 15 major systems in the past week. But more importantly, they're heading directly for Sol." "Sol?" Dr. Quintal looked confused. "Earth's star system," Jake explained. "Our homeworld is directly in their path." Colonel Chen stepped forward. "We have maybe 3 weeks before they reach human space. Earth's defense fleet is good, but they've never faced anything like this." Dr. Rodriguez, the military psychologist, began setting up his equipment. "We need to understand exactly how human resistance to the fear field works, and more importantly, whether we can teach it to others." Over the next several hours, the human team ran comprehensive tests on volunteer subjects from different species. The results were both encouraging and frustrating. Humans consistently showed minimal fear responses to Devourer recordings. Their heart rates increased slightly, and stress hormones rose to normal combat levels, but they maintained clear thinking throughout. Alien subjects, however, experienced complete system overload within seconds of exposure. "The fear runs too deep," Dr. Rodriguez explained to the group. "It's written into their DNA after billions of years of evolution. Can't simply overcome genetic programming with willpower." Colonel Chen had been working with a group of Kethfer warriors, trying to train them in human combat techniques. The results were disappointing. Even the bravest alien soldiers became helpless when viewing Devourer battle footage. "This isn't working," the colonel reported. "I can teach them tactics and weapons handling, but the moment they see the enemy, they shut down completely." Jake had been thinking about the problem from a different angle. What if we're approaching this wrong? Instead of trying to eliminate their fear, what if we help them use it? Everyone in the room looked at him with confusion. "Think about it," Jake continued. "Fear is supposed to be a survival mechanism. It warns you of danger and prepares your body for action. The problem is that the Devourers trigger such overwhelming fear that it becomes paralyzing instead of helpful." Dr. Rodriguez caught on to his thinking. "You're suggesting we redirect the fear response instead of suppressing it." "Exactly, Channa. Terror into desperate courage instead of helpless panic." Lisa pulled up psychological profiles of various species. "It could work. If we can teach them to interpret the fear as motivation rather than paralysis. ... Dr. Ben Rodriguez began developing new training protocols based on Jake's idea. Instead of trying to make aliens fearless, he taught them to transform their terror into fierce protective instincts. The fear of death became determination to save their families. The horror of extinction became rage against their destroyers. The first test subject was Zarthok, a young Kethfer warrior who had volunteered despite his obvious terror. Rodriguez showed him images of Devourers destroying his homeworld while simultaneously showing him pictures of Kethfer children playing safely. "Feel the fear," Rodriguez instructed. "But don't let it freeze you. Let it fuel your need to protect what matters." For several minutes, Zarthok shook uncontrollably as the terror washed over him. Then something changed. His trembling transformed into focused tension. His fearful whimpers became angry growls. "I will not let them take my cubs," the warrior snarled, his clawed hands clenching into fists. It wasn't perfect. Zarthok still felt overwhelming fear, but now he could function despite it. The terror had become a source of desperate strength, rather than weakness. "It's working," Colonel Chen said with amazement. "He's still scared out of his mind, but he's thinking clearly." They repeated the process with volunteers from other species. Some responded better than others, but gradually they built a small group of aliens who could face the Devourer threat without complete breakdown. Dr. Quintel was among the most successful trainees. The small Valerian scientist still shuddered, with fear when viewing enemy recordings, but he no longer fainted or became catatonic. "This is remarkable," he said, after a successful session. "I feel the same terror as before, but now it drives me to find solutions instead of hiding." However, their progress was interrupted by urgent communications from the outer sensor arrays. The 3 Devourer ships that had been approaching Omega 7 were now close enough for detailed scans. The images that came back defied description. The ships weren't built so much as grown, like massive organic tumors in space. They absorbed light around them, creating zones of absolute darkness. Reality seemed to bend and twist in their presence, as if normal physics broke down near them. "They're not just ships," Lisa observed, studying the sensor data. "They're alive. The entire vessel is a single living organism." Captain Brooks checked his instruments. "They'll be in weapons range within 6 hours. The Union defense ships assigned to this sector are already deserting. Half the crews have abandoned their posts." Colonel Chen reviewed the station's defensive capabilities. "We've maybe 50 humans here, plus about 200 aliens who've undergone the psychological training. Against 3 ships that destroyed entire civilizations." Jake looked at the approaching threats on the main screen. While every alien in the command center struggled with rising panic, he felt only grim determination. "Then we'll have to be enough," he said simply. Station Commander Tysek activated the general alarm. Throughout Omega 7, millions of refugees received the news that their sanctuary was about to become a battleground. Most began preparing to evacuate, but thousands chose to stay and fight. They might be terrified, but they were no longer helpless. Deathworlders had taught them something new. Sometimes courage isn't about being fearless. Sometimes it's about doing what must be done despite the fear. The space around Omega 7 erupted into chaos as 3 massive Devourer vessels emerged from the darkness. Each ship was the size of a small moon, their surfaces writhing like living tissue. Dark energy pulsed around them, bending starlight into impossible angles and making the void itself seem sick. Captain Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of his ship New Horizons, watching the Union defense fleet fall apart before his eyes. The proud Altarian battlecruiser Starfire had been leading the formation just moments ago. Now it drifted helplessly. Its crew collapsed from overwhelming terror. Similar scenes played out across dozens of ships as alien officers abandoned their posts or simply stopped functioning. "Sir, we're receiving distress calls from every Union vessel," reported Lieutenant Kate Wilson, the ship's communications officer. "Most are requesting immediate evacuation. Some crews are trying to escape in life pods." Brooks checked his tactical display. Of the 40 ships that had been defending the station, only 3 remained operational. His own vessel, plus 2 smaller patrol craft, with mostly human crews. Against 3 cosmic horrors that had destroyed entire civilizations. "All hands. This is the captain," Brooks announced over the ship's intercom. "We are now the primary defense for 10 million refugees. I know the odds look bad, but remember who we are. We're humans. Don't run from things that go bump in the night." On Omega 7, Colonel Amy Chen assembled her mixed-species strike team in the main hangar bay. The group included 50 human Marines, plus 200 aliens who had undergone Dr. Rodriguez's psychological training. Most of the alien volunteers still trembled with barely controlled fear, but they held their weapons steady. Zerthok, the young Kethvor warrior, stood among them. His massive frame shook with terror, but his yellow eyes burned with determination. "Colonel Chen," he rumbled, "my fear tells me to run, but my honor tells me to fight." "That's all any of us can do," Chen replied. "Feel the fear, then do your job anyway." Jake Sullivan and Dr. Lisa Martinez monitored the approaching battle from the station's command center. The main screen showed the 3 Devourer ships moving slowly toward them, like predators that knew their prey had nowhere to run. "Something's wrong with the sensor readings," Lisa observed. "These ships shouldn't be able to exist in normal space. Look at these gravity fluctuations." Station Commander Tysek studied the data with shaking hands. "They exist partially in our dimension and partially in others. That is why they appear so wrong to our eyes. They are bringing pieces of nightmare reality with them." The first engagement began when the lead Devourer ship fired upon the abandoned Altarian battlecruiser. The weapon wasn't energy or projectiles, but something far worse. A beam of pure wrongness struck the vessel, and it simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed or vaporized, but erased from reality, as if it had never been built. "Dear God," whispered Captain Brooks. "How do you fight something that can delete matter?" His question was answered when the Devourers turned their attention to his ship. The same reality-erasing beam lanced toward New Horizons, but Brooks was ready. Years of training in Earth's dangerous space lanes had taught him to think fast under pressure. "Emergency fold jump. Now," he ordered. The ship vanished just as the beam passed through the space it had occupied. They reappeared behind the Devourer formation, weapons charging for a counterattack. "Target their main structure and fire everything we have," Brooks commanded. New Horizons unleashed its full arsenal. Plasma cannons, missile batteries, and particle beams struck the nearest Devourer ship. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then dark fluid began leaking from wounds in the creature's hide. "We heard it," reported the weapons officer with amazement. "The thing actually bled." On Omega-7, Dr. Martinez watched the tactical display with growing excitement. Jake looked at this. "The Devourer's movement patterns are all wrong. They're not reacting like they expect resistance." "What do you mean?" "They're moving like hunters stalking prey that should be running away. But Captain Brooks is attacking them directly. It's confusing them." Station Commander Tysek overheard their conversation. In 3,000 years of recorded history, no one has ever successfully engaged a Devourer ship in combat. They have no experience fighting enemies who refuse to flee. The battle intensified as the 2 smaller human patrol craft joined the attack. Their weapons were less powerful than New Horizons, but they coordinated their strikes with military precision. The Devourers tried to target them with their reality-erasing beams, but the human pilots were too fast and unpredictable. Colonel Chen led her strike team to the disabled Union battlecruiser Bloodfang. The massive Kethfer warship still had functional weapons, but its crew was catatonic from fear exposure. As they boarded the vessel, Chen could see alien warriors lying paralyzed in the corridors, their minds broken by cosmic terror. "Spread out and secure the ship," she ordered. "Humans take the critical systems. Our alien friends provide support and backup." Zarthok and the other trained aliens moved carefully through their own ship, fighting against waves of primal fear. The young warrior found his captain huddled in a corner, whimpering like a frightened cub. "Captain Vorthok," Zarthok said gently, "I need your command codes." His superior looked up with eyes that had seen too much horror. "They cannot be fought, young one. We should run. We should hide." "No, Captain, we should make them bleed." Taking control of the battlecruiser's weapons systems, Chen's team joined the space battle. The Kethfer ship's massive plasma cannons added their fire to the human assault, and more dark fluid leaked from the wounded Devourer. But the cosmic horrors were adapting. The lead ship pulsed with dark energy, and suddenly every screen on Omega-7 displayed images of the Devourers themselves. The psychic assault was devastating. Millions of refugees collapsed as overwhelming terror flooded their minds. Even the trained aliens on Chun's team struggled against the enhanced fear field. Some dropped their weapons and fled. Others curled into defensive balls, their minds retreating. From unbearable horror, only the humans remained fully functional. "All human personnel. This is Colonel Chen," she broadcast. "We are now the primary defenders. Everyone else is down for the count." Captain Brooks received the message as his ship dodged another reality-erasing beam. "Understood, Colonel.
Us.
It's up to us now." Jake watched from the command center as human forces fought alone against impossible odds. 3 ships and a few hundred Marines against cosmic entities that had devoured civilizations. The math was simple and terrifying, but something unexpected was happening. The Devourers were taking damage. More importantly, they seemed confused by human tactics. Their movements became erratic, as if they couldn't understand why their prey was fighting back so effectively. "Lisa," Jake said urgently, "run a scan on the lead Devourer. Something's different about its energy patterns." Dr. Martinez activated the deep space sensors. What she found changed everything. "Jake, the psychic field is fluctuating. It's losing power every time they take damage." "What does that mean?" "I think their fear weapon requires them to be in perfect condition to work properly. The more we hurt them, the weaker their terror projection becomes." Station Commander Tysek looked up from his corner where he had been cowering. For the first time in hours, his compound eyes focused clearly. "You are saying that if we damage them enough, other species might be able to function again?" "It's possible," Lisa replied. "But we'd need to cause serious structural damage first." Captain Brooks's voice came over the communications system. "Well, then I guess we better get to work. All human forces, target the wounded Devourer. Let's see how much damage these things can really take." The tide of battle was about to turn. But first, humanity would have to prove that even cosmic horrors could bleed. The wounded Devourer ship writhed in space like a dying animal, dark fluid streaming from dozens of holes torn in its living hull. Captain Ryan Brooks guided New Horizons in for another attack run, his crew working with deadly efficiency despite facing an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. "Target the largest wound and fire plasma torpedoes," Brooks ordered. "Let's see what these things look like on the inside." The weapons struck home, tearing deeper into the creature's flesh. As the damage spread, something remarkable happened. Throughout the battle zone, the overwhelming terror that had paralyzed millions of beings began to weaken. On Omega 7, Station Commander Tysek slowly stood up from where he had been cowering. His compound eyes were still wide with fear, but he could think clearly for the first time since the Devourers arrived. "The fear," he whispered in amazement, "it is lessening." Dr. Lisa Martinez checked her instruments. "The psychic field is definitely weakening. As the Devourer takes damage, its ability to project terror decreases." All around the station, alien refugees began lifting their heads. The bone-deep horror was still there, but it no longer crushed their ability to function. Warriors picked up their weapons with shaking hands. Crystalline technicians returned to their control panels. Valerian scientists began calculating battle strategies. Jake Sullivan activated the station's communication system. "Attention all beings on Omega 7. The humans have proven something important today. These creatures can be hurt, they can bleed, and most importantly, they can be beaten. You may be afraid, but we are not helpless." His words spread through the refugee population like wildfire. Beings who had been paralyzed by cosmic terror began organizing themselves into work groups. They couldn't fight like humans, but they could support those who could. Colonel Amy Chen received reports from throughout the captured battlecruiser Bloodfang. "Ma'am, alien crew members are returning to their posts. They're still terrified, but they're functional." Zarthok approached her, his massive frame still trembling, but his yellow eyes burning with determination. "Colonel, my people remember how to fight. Give us targets." Chen smiled grimly. "How do you feel about boarding actions against those things?" The Kethra warrior's fear was obvious, but so was his resolve. It would be an honor to die fighting beside Deathworlders. The plan that emerged was desperate but simple. While the human ships continued their assault from space, strike. Teams would board the damaged Devourer and attack it from within. The aliens who had undergone Dr. Rodriguez's training would provide support. Channeling their terror into protective fury, Captain Brooks positioned New Horizons alongside the wounded creature's largest breach. "Colonel Chen, you have a window. The thing's to hurt to use its reality weapon effectively." Assault shuttles launched from both the human ship and the captured battlecruiser. Chen led the first wave, with Jake Sullivan volunteering to join the boarding party despite his diplomatic status. "I'm not a soldier," Jake admitted as they approached the Devourer's hole. "But I want to see what these things really are." Interior of the creature was a nightmare of organic corridors and pulsing walls. Everything was slightly wrong, as if designed by an intelligence that didn't understand normal physics. The air itself felt thick and hostile, but the human boarding teams moved through it without hesitation. Where other species would have been driven insane by the wrongness, humans simply adapted. It was disturbing and alien, but Earth had prepared them for hostile environments. "Spread out and look for something that might be a control center," Chen ordered. "If this thing is alive, it has to have a brain somewhere." Zarthok and his Kethfer warriors followed close behind the humans. Their terror barely held in check. But they kept moving, driven by desperate courage and the knowledge that their families depended on them. Deep in the creature's core, they found something that defied description. A massive chamber filled with swirling darkness and impossible geometries. At its center hung a pulsing organ that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. "That has to be it," Jake said, studying the alien structure. "The source of the fear field." Dr. Lisa Martinez's voice came through their communicators. "Jake, I'm reading massive psychic emissions from your location. Whatever you found, it's the heart of their terror weapon." Chen set her team to placing explosive charges around the chamber. "If we can destroy this, maybe we can level the playing field for everyone else." But as they worked, the chamber began to change. The darkness coalesced into shapes that hurt to look at directly. The Devourer was sending its equivalent of an immune system to deal with the intruders. The shadow creatures that emerged moved like liquid nightmare, reaching for the boarding team with appendages that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. When they touched Kethfer warriors, the aliens screamed and collapsed, their minds overwhelmed by direct contact with cosmic horror. Only the humans could stand against them. Jake found himself face to face with a creature that was both there and not there, real and unreal at the same time. Every instinct should have told him to run, but his Deathworld upbringing had taught him to fight when. Cornered, he raised his weapon and fired. The energy beam passed through the shadow creature without effect. But something unexpected happened. The thing recoiled as if hurt, not by the weapon, but by something else entirely. "It's not the guns," Jake realized. "It's us. They can't handle direct contact with beings who aren't afraid of them." Chen caught on immediately. "All human personnel, engage with hand-to-hand combat. Use your resistance to their nature as a weapon." The battle in the creature's core became surreal. Human Marines fought shadow entities with knives and bare hands, their complete lack of cosmic terror serving as both shield and sword. The nightmare creatures adapted to feed on fear and despair, found themselves facing prey that refused to be victims. Meanwhile, the space battle reached its climax. The damaged Devourer's fear field continued to weaken, allowing Union ships to return to the fight. Alien crews who had been paralyzed for hours began firing on the cosmic horrors with desperate fury. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead Devourer," Captain Brooks ordered. "The boarding team is inside. Let's give them some support." The combined fleet poured weapons fire into the wounded creature. Plasma beams, missile salvos, and particle cannons tore through its living hull. Dark fluid streamed into space as the monster's death throes began. Inside the core chamber, Chen's team finished setting their charges. 30 seconds to detonation, she announced. "Everyone out, now." But Jake looked at the pulsing organ at the chamber's center and made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of running, he walked directly up to the source of galactic terror and placed his hand on its surface. The reaction was immediate and devastating. The creature's entire psychic network convulsed as it tried to process contact with a mind that had no fear of it. Jake felt the thing's confusion and growing panic as it realized it had encountered something completely outside its experience. "Jake, get out of there," Chen shouted. He smiled and activated the manual detonator. "Tell everyone the Deathworlders said hello." Explosion tore through the Devourer's core, destroying the psychic amplifier that had projected terror across star systems. Without its fear weapon, the creature was just another large and dangerous animal. Union ships swarmed it like angry insects, tearing it apart with conventional weapons. The other two devourers, seeing their companion's fate, began retreating toward dark space. But now, they faced a united galaxy that was no longer paralyzed. By fear, Jake survived the explosion, pulled out by Chen's team at the last second. As they returned to Omega 7, he looked out at the debris field that had once been an unstoppable cosmic horror. "How do you feel?" Dr. Martinez asked when they reunited on the station. Jake considered the question.
Like we just taught the universe?
That some prey bites back. The news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Devourers had been defeated in direct combat. The species that everyone had dismissed as violent primitives from a backwater death world had accomplished what no other civilization could manage. They had stood against cosmic horror and won, as Union fleets began hunting down the remaining Devourers. Jake stood in Omega 7's observation deck watching the stars. Millions of refugees who had thought themselves doomed were now planning to rebuild their worlds. The galaxy had learned that courage could be taught, that fear could be overcome, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes came from the most dangerous places. Humanity had found its place in the cosmos, not as conquerors, but as guardians. When darkness came from the spaces between stars, there would always be Deathworlders ready to remind it that this galaxy was protected.